So this is an article that Chris Ritter published on his peopleneedjesus.net page, and as always, I highly recommend going over there and seeing the multiple resources he has there. In particular, for those who are curious about the growth of the Global Methodist Church, they have pictures of Bishop Mark Webb and President Pro Tempore Lester Spencer going over to, I believe, the Central African Republic. No, that doesn't sound right. It was another African nation. They're going on a tour through there, a lot of preaching, a lot of excitement. So you can check that out. The thing I wanted to look at today was an article that was posted, written by Bob Phillips, who I'm sure is a name that I should know and will know. He wrote a really decent article entitled Annual Conference Wisdom for Remaining Traditional Types. And so it has some really decent stuff worth considering in here. I'm not going to have time to read over the whole article, but I wanted to cover some of the opening stuff and then provide a link in the show notes when I repost this later today for those who want to follow up on this, because I think he has some really decent advice for those. Now, it's not advice for how to get out if you want out. It's advice for if you are in and there may or may not be a way out later, but you want to faithfully participate and advocate for yourself and your church. This is a good series of things to consider. So I'll go over some of the intro and then leave it to you to read the rest. So he says, "'Tis the season for annual conferences, the recurring grab bag of fellowship, gossip, worship, politicking, and that endearing thing called legislation. Lest disaffiliates gloat, keep in mind this entire piece also has real or potential application to GMC similar exercises. In the light and the fog of the recently concluded General Conference, what are the remaining traditionalists to do? What constructive approach can recent but still caring former members properly adopt, given the departure of 25% of the U.S. Church and the recent single day departure of an additional 1.2 million United Methodists from Africa's Ivory Coast? What must an annual conference name and engage to move into a productive future? I offer 5 observations for remaining traditional believers in the UMC. First, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. I'm sure that's a saying. If I've heard it before, that's a good saying. Liberal progressive folks have done a superb and ethical job in organizing. Right there, I wanted to take offense. They have done a good job. I'm not sure how ethical it has always been. However, if we're talking about making false ballots or physically restraining people from voting, that sort of thing hasn't been done. But even so, what he says following is fair. They are prepared to move various annual conference policies and practices in a new leftward direction. They are not cheating and have every right to remake the UMC into their image. If remaining traditionalists do not organize, communicate, and create constructive ways to advocate their traditional point of view, what happened in Charlotte will be repeated before laity who may vote their concerns with their feet. Whining about what an annual conference does without forming alternatives is no answer." So he's saying, you need to form alternatives. You need to make sure that you're at the table. If you're trying to create the picture that they're just so crooked, they're not even going to let you talk, then he says that's just a self-fulfilling prophecy. You need to provide. I'm rephrasing what he's saying. He's saying they've been perfectly ethical and above ground in all that they're doing. I'm not really of that mind. I think that timelines were moved, judgment calls were made that they didn't have the right to move or make. So I think I think there has been a lot of maneuvering that has not been on the level, so to speak. But even so, uh, if you are going to continue to be part of an organization, even if it's against your will, then you need to make sure that you do your part to be at the table, not on the menu. I think that's great advice. Second, watch your language. This cuts both ways. When certain general conference decisions were framed as ending hate filled exclusionary beliefs, many traditionalists knew that language was aimed at them. They knew that language was aimed at them, this mean language. As a delegate of General Conference 2019, I recalled the silence and the emotion filling the St. Louis Hall when the traditionalist plan was passed. There was no line dancing. There was no spiking the ball or other in your face slaps aimed at those convinced that Christian marriage is not limited to one man and one woman. Traditional delegates were keenly aware that friends and fellow believers were hurt by that vote, and they consciously resisted ungracious celebration. The easy use of demeaning language to describe historic Christian convictions is a dog that won't hunt among traditional laity. United Methodists, remaining true centrists and conservatives, can take verbal inferences of bigotry in silence, but the trust damage is real. Speak up and speak out graciously and clearly. So he's simultaneously highlighting, hey, when traditionalists were in charge and then on top, they were not ungracious and nasty the way that you've seen liberals and progressives be over the last few months. They've been spiking the ball. They literally had a line dance at General Conference, if you didn't see this. Um, he says that sort of behavior is hurtful and in bad faith, and conservatives need to find a respectful and direct way to convey to people this is cruel. You shouldn't behave this way. This is not the right way to act towards us. So finding a way to speak clearly, directly, respectfully, but firmly towards liberals and progressives is important. And then we'll go on a little bit further, but we're almost done. The same dog likewise doesn't hunt when employed by conservatives who slam the UMC with name calling, denying no real Christian can be or remain United Methodist, or otherwise filling the air with judgmental zingers. Such attitudes grieve the spirit and make a zero positive witness on outsider non Christians who are curious about the song. They will know we are Christians by our love. Especially to social media and Facebook commandos, let Ephesians 4:30 be your guide. Look it up and cut it out. So I think that this is a point well taken. There are some conservatives, and I've said some harsh things. Maybe Bob wouldn't like the language that I've used. I do think that the United Methodist Church has left the historic Christian faith and inverted the faith, created a caricature and a counterfeit. But even so, to speak against individuals who stay in the United Methodist Church for various reasons, I've had a problem with. So I think there are many people who are staying in their local churches because their local churches are still faithful and haven't been allowed out, or are only just now beginning some kind of process to get out. I think there are some conservatives that have tried to stay out of a witness, and biblically, we have the model of the central prophet who stays within the depraved society and witnesses against it. And I think that there are some like that. And I think those are ways that you can stay spiritually okay with God, even while maintaining one's position in a body that is not faithful. So whether or not you agree with me, the kind of rhetoric that one uses you should at least be cognizant of the possibility that in your clarity you can actually make things worse. And my fear is that things that I say can discourage people who are faithful. And so I think a lot of people say stuff like that trying to like galvanize people and like challenge them to do something that they're afraid of. And I would like to believe that there are ways of doing that without saying, unless you make this decision, you are not a faithful believer. There are already so many of those things directly out of the Bible. And this line of how far a church can go into heresy before no Christian can possibly participate in it, that's not a solved question. So I think we have to be gracious here. So maybe that makes me a sellout. Let's do his third point out of 5, and then we'll be done with this article for today. Third, focus on what matters most. Retired United Methodist bishop and professional curmudgeon Will Willimon recently growled how General Conference 2024 missed the boat on rebooting a denomination that in the US and Europe is in numerical free fall. As the US begins its season of conferences, the elephant in the room is not the church's position on divestment from Israel or inclusive pronouns or fear of transgendered or non-binary pastors hiding under the bed. It is bringing people to Jesus and discipling them to go the kingdom distance while spiritually reproducing. The GMC likewise is called to that task and to resist efforts to define themselves or be defined by unfriendly others in negative terms, i.e., the church that doesn't allow this or that. Also, recall that transfer growth, UMC to GMC, is not kingdom growth, but rearrangement. Bring people to Christ who are not his, do conversion weddings and discipleship marriage that goes the distance. And that was a little over my head. His writing style is not exactly on my wavelength. But I do think, keeping the main thing is always a wise thing. And there are a lot of conservatives that are trapped in the United Methodist Church. Well, do you just spend all your time agonizing over that, or do you continue to do the main mission? I think continuing to do the main mission, if you're going to stay in the UMC, there is no point in life where you can stop doing the mission of being disciples and making disciples. And so his clarity there is well taken. So, like I said, I'll republish this later in the day and put the show notes, put the link to this article in the show notes. I highly advise you to read that if you're a conservative United Methodist who's trapped or otherwise not leaving yet. And then also, if you're global Methodist and you read that, he's got correctives for us that we need to bear in mind. Now, there was an article by Cameron Wright